Welcome back to another video. My name is Mallory, and in today's video I'm going to be doing the end of year book tag. I know that there are a couple versions of this book tag. I'm pretty sure I saw one circulating back around like a few years ago, but the one that I'm doing today I saw from Larry Reads and Sarah Caroli. I'm pretty sure it originated from Destiny Sedwell. But I'm not 100%, but that is the tag that I will be following today. So the first question is most disappointing read of the year. And I think for me, that has to be Ick Factor by Morgan Elizabeth. So I gave this book 3.5 stars, which is the lowest rating I've ever given a Morgan Elizabeth book. I usually love her books, but this one was just kind of a letdown. It felt very annoying at times, like the main characters. The conflict was kind of weak in my opinion. It just was kind of a letdown in terms of the other books that I've read by her that I really loved. So I definitely still need to get caught up on, oh, I forgot that I had a sticker in there because I got the signed copy of it from when I was subscribed to her Patreon. But yeah, I definitely still need to read some of her other books that came out this year. But yeah, this one, a little bit of a letdown. And then the next question is most underdog book, which I don't quite know what that means, but I kind of... I'm taking it to mean like a book that you didn't expect to love as much as you did. And for me, that is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I hadn't read a YA fantasy in such a long time because all of them felt so boring and repetitive and stuff, just compared to adult fantasy I had been reading. But this book and series really blew me out of the water, and it's absolutely one of my new favorites now. The next question was, what was an overhyped book that you read? And this question was hard to answer because I feel like books that I read, not that they're not overhyped, I just don't like that phrase at all, because if a book is popular, it's because people like it, and that doesn't mean that it's overhyped just because you didn't like the book. But I guess I'm just going with a book that was really popular that I didn't like. And the book I went with for this question was Actuary Eve Brown. I don't really know for sure if this was like popular now, but back when I first heard about the series, it was huge all over BookTube back in like 2015-ish when this series first came out. And it just wasn't for me and was definitely my least favorite in the trilogy. The next question is, what was a book that surprised you? And for me, that was easily A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. And this isn't just because it's a mystery and a plot twist that surprised me, which was a part of it, but it's the fact that just it was a mystery. And until this book, I hadn't read mysteries just because I don't know why. Honestly, I don't know why. I just sometimes have trouble getting out of my comfort zone, especially when reading, because reading tends to be like my escape from reality, and so I know what I like and I read what I like. But my sister finally convinced me to read this book, and it got me hooked on mystery thrillers. I've only read 2 so far this year, but I definitely want to read more next year. So the next question is your favorite book couples of the year. And I tried so hard to narrow this down to one couple, but I read a lot of romance as a genre as well as a subgenre of fantasy and sci-fi and stuff, but like because of that, it was just basically impossible to pick just one. To keep this answer a little shorter than it would be otherwise, I limited myself to not using books that I've reread this year and only talking about books that I did read for the first time this year. So first we have Lennon and CJ from Fireline. I absolutely loved them as a couple. They were, this was one of the first books that I read, not this year, but when I first really got back into reading. And I absolutely adored them as a couple in their dynamic and how much they cared for each other in like the mental health representation. It was just so well done. I absolutely loved them. Next was Nova and Adrian from Renegades. I literally can't stop talking about this book without a grin on my face because that's just how much I love the series. But talk about a perfectly masterfully done slow burn romance in a fantasy. It was just the tension and the angst, how much they cared for each other, and it was just so well done. And then there is Teddy and Gus from Lost and Lassoed, and they are my absolute favorite couple from that series. I don't know if it was just like the enemies to lovers, but just the tension, the banter, the angst. It was just so well done, and I loved them so much. And then Allie and Josh from Lights Out, which I also read pretty recently, and it's so hard to talk about these couples without just like giggling because it just romance just makes me so happy. But Allie and Josh especially, I absolutely loved They, just that audiobook was done really well. I loved their banter and their relationship and how it all unfolded. I would need to reread that book again, actually, even though I literally just read it last month. And lastly, Lark and Lachlan from Leather and Lark, which is another pretty recent read. I think I also read that in November. The history in both of their own personal lives that kind of intertwine with each other, and the conflict and the fake marriage. Oh, it was just so well done. And then the next question is your favorite main characters of the year. So first, assume that any people that I mentioned from the last question also applies here, but on top of that, I also have a couple of books. So first is Anastasia and Rowan from Scythe. This was just, I love their character development so far in the series, and I'm absolutely loving them as main characters, especially Anastasia. Them as main characters are very, very fun and interesting to me. And then I have Addie LaRue from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This is like one of the only books that I own that I've actually annotated because I absolutely loved this book and Addie as a character and just her thoughts and emotions and everything that she experienced in this book. I still think about this book on like a weekly basis. It was so good. And lastly is Evie and Tristan from Assistant to the Villain. That book was also just really good, and I like both of them a lot as main characters. They're both really funny, which is something I had never thought that I would look for in main characters, but I absolutely love them. The next question is new favorite author you discovered this year, and I have 3 for this question. The first is Holly Jackson, and I read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and then also a reappearance of Rachel Price, which are 2 of my favorite books of the year. And then Lila Sage, and I read her 3 books this year from the Rebel Blue Ranch series. I'm just not realizing I only have 2 authors on this list, not 3. I apologize. So it's just those 2, Holly Jackson and Lila Sage, 2 favorite authors that I read this year for the first time. And then the next question is author that didn't quite work out for you this year. And for me, I think that was Catherine Cowles. I only read 1 book by her this year. I've read a couple in the past, and it was good. Like, I enjoyed the books that I've read from her, especially the one that I read this year, Tattered Stars or Tattered Sky or something along those lines. But the rest of the series was pretty boring. I ended up like skimming and not really finishing it, like basically a DNF. I won't say I'll never read another book by her, but it's probably not super likely. And the next question is happiest book you read this year. And this book isn't inherently super happy, nothing goes wrong, but it made me laugh out loud and giggle, and that's why it was such a happy book, and that is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. The book did definitely have its dark moments since it is a fantasy and there's drama and it's about a villain. It's probably the most I've laughed in a book in a really long time, so I definitely attribute happiest book to this one. The next question is what was the saddest book that you read this year? And I debated on whether or not to go with this one just because it was nonfiction, but I feel like it was hard to give it to any other book, and that was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. It was easily the saddest book that I've read this year. I listened to it on audio, which is narrated by Jennette McCurdy herself. Just lots of really sad and traumatizing stories, and I definitely cried a couple of times while listening to this book. But yeah, I definitely think this was the saddest book that I read this year. And then the next question is the most frustrating book that you read this year, and this was a hard question because I haven't really felt like I was frustrated by a book and kept reading. Like, if I get frustrated by a book, I end up just DNFing. But for me, that was probably going to be Frenched by Melanie Harlow. I don't really remember a ton about this book. I do remember skimming it quite a bit because I was just annoyed at how the main characters were acting and the decisions that they were making, and everything just felt so unrealistic. So I don't know why I even kept reading and why I didn't just DNF it, but that's probably the one I'll go with. The next question is the best book adaptation of the year. And I have 2, a TV show and a movie. And I'm so happy to gush about this TV show because no one I know has watched it, and it is like a new obsession of mine, and I'm so upset that there's only 6 episodes out, and that is Maxton Hall. I have not actually read the book because it is a German book originally, but I'm pretty certain it is being translated into English in 2025, so I will definitely be reading those books. I literally binged all 6 episodes in like 2 days. It is so good. The cliffhanger, absolutely insane, and it already got renewed for a season 2, which I hope comes out next year because I think they're already filming. I love this show so much. And then for a movie, it's probably going to be Wicked. I have read the Wicked book. I read it in high school. Not my favorite. It is a little weird. in case you weren't aware. Lots of weird things. Check content warnings before going into that, because going into that blind was an experience. We'll just say that. But I am a huge musical theater geek. I love musicals. I listen to them all the time. And so I don't think I've mentioned that before, but I did then go see the Wicked movie in theaters and absolutely loved it. And then for the next question, it is your favorite covers of the year. And first is Fireline by Maggie Gates. I just absolutely love this cover. I don't know what it is. It's just, I think the colors and the scenery is just very pretty to me. And then specifically my copy of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I like the original copy a lot too, but I just love this red and gold, and it has the little bookmark, which I know is technically not part of the cover. But yeah, I just love this specific edition. I love the original black and gold one too, but the red is just very pretty in my opinion. And then the last one I have for this question is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I don't know what it is about this cover. Maybe it's just because I know what like the spiral represents and like why this is the cover art, but I absolutely love this cover as well. And then the next one is a book you haven't stopped thinking about, and I have 3 books on this list, which I feel like I need to start narrowing it down, but it's so hard because I just want to keep talking about all of these books. I'm not going to go into detail with all of them because I'm pretty sure, yeah, all 3 of these books I've already mentioned. First is The Renegades Trilogy by Marissa Meyer. I only own Supernova, hence why that's what I'm holding up. I will never shut up about the series. Absolutely a new favorite series of mine. And then the next one is Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And then a more recent one is Lights Out by Navisa Allen. I apologize, I don't remember which one it is. But yeah, easily those are like the top 3 books that I've consistently been thinking about since I read them. And then the next question is an unpopular book that you read. And while this is a reread, I feel like it's the most unpopular book that I read this year, and I still need more people to talk about it, and that is The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. I've talked about this book a million times on my channel before, so I feel like I don't need to hash it out again, but please go read this book. And then the next question is the book with the most unique concept that you've read this year, and I think I'm gonna go with An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. Like, this isn't the most unique concept there is, it's just for me, I don't read a ton of sci-fi, and the sci-fi that I do is very like high fantasy sci-fi, not like contemporary sci-fi that's set in the real world. So this definitely was very unique, and it was unique in the sense that the point of the story wasn't even really the aliens, it was the commentary on social media and virality, and I just really appreciated it for that. The next question is a book that you read this year that you would reread, and I have 4 books on this list. I've already talked about all of them, so I'm just gonna go list them off again, and that is Renegades, Lights Out, Leather and Lark, and Fireline. Probably my favorite books of the year, and I would easily reread them again and again and again. That is it for specifically the books that I've read this year. Now we're getting into a little more of the kind of reflections and to 2025. So the next question is a 2024 reading goal reflection and a reading goal for 2025. So at the time that I got back into reading, which was around August of this year, I think, I had set a goal of 24 books because I hadn't read pretty much all year really, because spring semester this year really kicked my butt and I lost all motivation to do anything. And then I had my summer internship where I was just so tired after working a 9 to 5 every day that I just didn't want to read. So I was like, you know what, I'll try to get myself to read 4 to 5 books a month. Like, that feels pretty good. And then I just consistently read like 12 to 15 books every month. And so at this point in time, I have read, I think, 60 books, which is so much more than I even imagined possible at this time, just because it had been such a long time since I really had time to read and enjoy a book. So I think knowing that going into 2025, when I will be starting my tracking at the beginning of the year, I want to set a goal of 60 books, since I'll have the entire year to track. And that is setting the bar low, but knowing myself, I'd much rather have a low bar that I'm very much overachieve than underachieve by setting 200 books as my goal. So that is, I think, going to be my goal for next year. And then the next question is a book that you wish you got to this year. And I feel like this is not going to be a surprise to anybody when I hold this book up, but yeah, still haven't read The Toll. I don't know why. I even tried reading it like a month ago and I got maybe a chapter in and was like, nah. So something about this series is just like really holding something over my head because I cannot for the life of me get into this book. Maybe I need to try the audiobook because the length of it is like really tripping me out compared to the other two in the series. I don't know, but I need to read this book. And then the next and final question for the end of your book tag is, what will you prioritize in your 2025 reading year? So I don't like to set a ton of like hard goals for my reading per se, because then it starts to feel less like a hobby and more like I don't want to say job, because even before I did BookTube, I wasn't really setting hard goals other than like a reading goal for myself, because it just felt too much like work if I started to set goals for my reading. So I try to be pretty general and vague about things that I try to do when I'm like things I want to achieve when I read. And so the only thing I'm really going to start trying to think about when I am choosing what to read, when I am choosing what I want to read next year, is that I want to just read more diversely. And this can mean a lot of things. Like it could just mean exploring other genres, which I definitely want to do. I want to read more mysteries. I want to try to get into more of the like lit fic genre and thrillers and stuff like that, but also like other themes, or just reading more diversely in terms of reading from more authors of color or LGBTQ authors, or reading more about those stories, just because I feel like, reflecting on what I did read this year, it was not diverse, like really at all. It was just a lot of what's popular, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I definitely want to branch out and try to read more indie, just diversify my reading a little bit. And with that, I am officially done with the end of your book tag. I'm very excited to really get into these end of year videos, because these are always my favorite to watch on BookTube before I started my own channel. So this was a really fun experience, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time with a new one.